An NFL kicker's commencement speech at a Catholic college is drawing calls for his firing. Here with analysis of that story and many more is the Papal Posse, editor-in-chief of thecatholicthing.org, Robert Royal, and canon lawyer and priest of the Archdiocese of New York, Father Gerald Murray. Thank you both for being here. As we mentioned, Kansas City Chiefs kicker Harrison Butker delivered a fiery commencement address at Benedictine College. He devoted a large part of that speech to the bishops, President Biden, the celebration of the traditional family. Take a look.
Our own nation is led by a man who publicly and proudly proclaims his Catholic faith, but at the same time is delusional enough to make the sign of the cross during a pro-abortion rally. Before we even attempt to fix any of the issues plaguing society, we must first get our own house in order, and it starts with our leaders. Our bishops are not politicians, but shepherds. So instead of fitting in the world by going along to get along, they too need to stay in their lane and lead. I'm beyond blessed with the many talents God has given me, but it cannot be overstated that all of my success is made possible because a girl I met in band class back in middle school would convert to the faith, become my wife, and embrace one of the most important titles of all, homemaker.
It didn't take long for Butker to get raked over the coals in the media. Former Monday Night Football reporter Lisa Guerrero called Harrison out for being sexist, citing the large female viewership of the NFL. USA Today Sports labeled the speech ugly, merely for celebrating homemakers for their, by choice, I should add, including his wife, Isabel. The NFL has now even come out with a statement. We'll put it up on the screen. Harrison Butker gave a speech in his personal capacity. His views are not those of the NFL as an organization. The NFL is steadfast in our commitment to inclusion, which only makes our league stronger. That's Jonathan Bean, the NFL Senior VP of Diversity and Inclusion. Now, Father, are you surprised at the backlash we're seeing simply for an NFL player celebrating traditional roles as a choice?
Well, the NFL's made a terrible mistake in going after someone for speaking their religious convictions. A couple of things I could say, Raymond. Number one, is the NFL in the business of commenting on the religious speeches given by its membership? If they're going to talk about the personal conduct of players, they better be very careful, because there is no rule that NFL players have to clear their speeches with the league in order to exclude religious truths that the league doesn't find good. And then secondly, the VP for inclusion, he should be renamed the VP for exclusion, because he's excluding Harrison Butker and millions of Catholics who are in the NFL either as players or viewers. And by the way, I think his wife decided that she liked being a homemaker, just like my mom did.
Right.
So the NFL, we could have a crime sheet 3 pages long in the last 3 years of NFL players who committed violent acts against women. And here we have a man affirming the value of your wife and kids being raised by a religious NFL player. I think the NFL has done something terrible here.
Bob, as I read this, and Bill Donahue has a particularly good piece about it today, this is, as Father referenced, about religious liberty. Butker's expressing his faith in the public square at a Catholic college, where he got a standing ovation, by the way. Do you see this as an attempt to silence Catholic thought and practice in the public square?
Well, of course. It's part and parcel of what's happened with social media, that you almost can't become any dumber than people have become about these kinds of issues, as if some one person speaking about one thing implicates an entire organization like the NFL. Now, it's known to social scientists, just to take one point, that most women, when they are surveyed, actually say they would like to spend more time at home with their families and their children, especially when their children are young. So the fact that a few voices out there in social media and on TV and in these DEI organizations have protested is not a surprise. But I think the rest of us ought to really be forcefully putting out there, as Butker himself did, that a lot of fulfillment does not come through work. a lot of fulfillment comes through your family. And that's true not only for women, but for men as well.
Yeah, which he referenced in his talk. He said, look, he basically said, we're called to do things in the world, but our highest vocations are as mother and father to children and building a home. That was in essence what he was saying. Father, I had to laugh when I saw the outrage over an NFL player saying things like we should protect unborn kids and we need to have more moms and dads at home. There's a petition to get the Chiefs to fire Butker over these comments. Wake-up call. 27 NFL players have been arrested multiple times for assault and battery of spouses, drug use, theft, killing animals. But Harris Butker is the moral problem at the NFL? I think not. Father, should the NFL overreact? Might Butker have a First Amendment claim, do you think?
Well, I think he has to inform the NFL that he did not begin the speech with these words. My views represent the NFL policy. He never said that. For the NFL to conclude that when a player speaks in his own capacity, that somehow his views might be thought to represent what the NFL, whatever their values are, that's absurd. Legally speaking, he's been slandered by the NFL because they're imputing that he harmed the organization by doing something he should have known he shouldn't have done. There's no way that's true. He spoke as a Catholic. Are Catholics no longer welcome in the NFL? I mean, this is ridiculous. Where's Newt Rockne in all this picture? Come on, Catholics have been involved in football from the beginning. And I think we need to get back to religious liberty as the cornerstone of how we live with each other.
Bob, you know what irritates me most about this? And it's a sign, I think, of the polarization we find ourselves in. There's an instant ideological mobilization and demonization of whomever says something in defense of these traditional values. But there's no counter. Where are the Catholic bishops saluting this man? Where are the Catholics raising their voices to support him? You know, they're really good at letting people get attacked in public. Your thoughts, Bob?
Yeah, you know, I was really taken. At first, when he made these remarks, I thought that he had gone to a Catholic college because he sounds like somebody who's been deeply formed in the faith. And I mean, not just in personal practice, but in expressing some of the most important things that the church has to say in public these days. As it turns out, he did not go to a Catholic college or university and learn this stuff all on his own. And it's sad to say, but I think we almost could say that it would be very rare for someone who had been through most Catholic colleges and universities to be so bold in asserting Catholicism. I think they would be a little bit more gun-shy about this sort of thing. But look, it's great that he put it out there. I don't think that these attempts to get him fired are going to work. The Kansas City Chiefs need him. He won the Super Bowl for them this year. He's as important to them as Patrick Mahomes. And I think that is going to prevail over all this sort of ideological DEI stuff that's happening.
Father Butker also spent a chunk of his speech focused on the U.S. Catholic bishops and his support of the traditional Latin Mass, which I heard one of my broadcast colleagues today equate with extremism and, some kind of jihad mentality. But this, I think, is going to be the next wave of attack on him from inside the church or those who've left the church but are vaguely Catholic. But the fact is, this is where vibrant young Catholics live, in these traditional parishes. Speak to me a little bit about that advocacy, if you will, for the traditional Latin Mass and the vociferous backlash against it.
To try and marginalize people like the Latin Mass as extremists and out of the church even, or people who don't understand Christianity or Catholicism, this is false. Pope John Paul II understood very well that the traditional Latin Mass, which had been celebrated in this church for more than 1,000 years, maybe 1,500 years, this is a worthy thing needing to be preserved. Harrison Butker serves the traditional Latin Mass. You know, he is someone who understands the beauty and meditative spirit of it. It's no surprise that you go to a Latin Mass, you see large families, you see devout people, you see young men entering the seminary. The critics of the Latin Mass are most ungenerous in imputing these kind of motives and schemes on the part of Latin Mass goers. They should take a break, go to a Latin Mass, talk to some people. You'll see. I know this from experience. they're ordinary Catholics who want to pray in peace. There's no extremism in going to the Latin Mass. That's a false claim.
Unless carrying children into the world and into Mass is suddenly an extremist thing. I guess empty pews is a better answer. Good luck with that. And speaking of the U.S. bishops, a USCCB-sponsored webcast on unity, moderated by Gloria Purvis and featuring Bishop Robert Barron, Cardinal Robert McElroy of San Diego, and Bishop Daniel Flores of Brownsville, aired this week. The live stream panel discussion warned of polarization in the church, urging a return to civility and dialogue. Here's a little bit of the exchange.
What's happened now is a kind of tribalism, I would say, is a falling into opposing camps. And what's broken down is the love that makes real dialogue possible. Where I see it in my work in the internet space, and sadly, not just in the political culture, in the culture of the church, you see it.
It's always good to remember what Jesus would not do when he was out amongst the people. He would not be unkind, especially to the poor and to those who had no standing in the world. And also, he would never commit an injustice in order to kind of promote justice.
People are coming toward each other in the life of the church, looking first at that label. What are you? Where do you stand in the warlike culture politics of our country, rather than what unites us and where do we stand in terms of our identity as Catholics and with a Christological outlook?
Bob, your thoughts on this exchange. Has tribalism infected the church at the parish level in recent years, stunting true dialogue? Or is there a true disagreement over the direction of doctrine and discipline, and that is causing this rupture, if you will, in unity?
Yeah, in my experience, at least, most parishes get along rather well because you don't necessarily have to get into some of the hot-button issues on a regular basis, in an ordinary basis in a parish. But I think you're exactly right, Raymond, that we are at a point in a culture where we have two different countries here in the United States. I mean, no amount of attempts to civilize it, that's the phrase that they used in this discussion this week, to civilize this situation is going to get us past what are irreconcilable differences. People on the one hand who think that abortion and trans rights are sacrosanct. I mean, our president and a former Speaker of the House, both Catholics, have said that it is almost a sin to oppose those things. I mean, to me, I'm grateful for the almost, but it's astonishing that one part of our church could actually think that to try to control those things is somehow sinful. And on the other hand, of course, we have people who are very passionate, heroic and whatnot, and trying to save unborn human life, which is being destroyed almost at 1 million lives a year.
Father, it's curious. That notion really wasn't delved deeply into. They simply said, well, this group is opposing the Pope or this group is opposing that one. But they really didn't explore those finer points. I mean, just as an example, and if I had been the moderator, I would have raised this. Cardinal McElroy was a big supporter of ordaining female deacons before that last synod. Is the break and the rupture being caused by that kind of doctrinal friction and innovation being imposed on the church? Is that the source of what divides us, Father?
Well, absolutely. And that's what's ironic. I read the transcript of this discussion, and they, it seems, intentionally avoided naming any specific doctrinal question or doctrinal teaching which is under basically assault by forces of reform and renovation, so to speak. The women deacons is a perfect example of that. Teaching on homosexuality. Cardinal McElroy is very forceful that he thinks the current church teaching on homosexuality needs to be re-examined. Now, as regards our divine Savior always being kind, that depends on the word kindness. If rebuking a sinner is an act of kindness, which it is, well, then most people would think that he's being mean. Remember what he said about the Pharisees? Your whitened sepulchres, whitewashed tombs. Yeah. He called Herod that fox. I mean, the Lord used vivid language to try and stir people out of sin. The discussion came down, in my theory, and my understanding, to basically Rodney King approach to life. Remember the motorist, Rodney King? And during the riots in L.A., he said, can't we all just get along? That's, in the essence, you draw from this. There was no attempt to say Catholic orthodoxy is not negotiable. We don't dialogue on the content of the faith. What we dialogue on is how do we help people to understand and believe in the doctrine of the faith? That is basically absent from that discussion.
Well, and I also, when some of the participants here, and you see, I mean, look, I get into all kinds of trouble because I speak the truth and I'm blunt on this stuff, but the audience needs to know, they already know. Bishop Flores is one of the main proponents of unregulated immigration in any possible way. When those what are political issues become bigger and more important than the foundational eternal teachings of the church, it throws the balance off. And yeah, people stop listening because they want the truth and the eternal. They don't want the political. We have enough of that. And it's sad that those issues really didn't come up honestly because they are uncomfortable. And that's how you have dialogue. But I want to move on to the fruits of Fiducia Supplicans, the Vatican directive on same-sex blessings and blessings of couples in irregular situations. In April, Father Joseph Williams, the pastor of St. Vincent de Paul Parish near downtown Chicago, blessed a same-sex couple. In video shared on Instagram by Kelly Knight, a Methodist minister and a self-identified queer community organizer, Father Williams is seen in church blessing the same-sex couple. Looks like a marriage ceremony. Since then, Williams has apologized for the way in which he blessed them, calling it a very poor decision that violated the Catholic Church's new guidelines. Father, the priest had initially suggested that Fiducia Supplicans allowed for this type of blessing to be administered. Your reaction when you saw this?
No, this is horrifying. He also referred to the two people as spouses. This is absurd, but predictable because Fiducia Supplicans is basically said people who are living in homosexual relationships are now capable of receiving a blessing, which means God will favor their relationship. No, the bishops of Africa understood the threat that Fiducia Supplicans represents to the integrity of the faith. And this is a perfect example of it. He apologized not for the fact that he's confirming people in sin, but that he chose the wrong words and symbols in doing so. That was obviously intended to be a pseudo-marriage. It had all the characteristics of people getting married in church. His apology, I think, was a sort of a non-apology. This is where the Catholic Church is going when priests take Fiducia Supplicans, apply it locally. Fiducia Supplicans needs to be withdrawn. The bishops of Africa, Cardinal Mbongo of Kinshasa, is absolutely right. This is a denial of Scripture and Catholic teaching. It needs to end.
Bob, now the Archdiocese of Nairobi, Kenya, allowed a polygamist to marry in a Catholic church on May 5th. The priest celebrated this alleged marriage between a man and a woman and another woman, his second concubine, in the pews. Bob, the ambiguity of recent Vatican pronouncements seems to be colliding with inculturation to create situations like this. What do you make of this polygamous marriage in Africa, where otherwise there's this great return to tradition?
Well, look, we've talked about this many times on the show. Part of the difficulty is the moment in which we find ourselves toward the end of this, the papacy of Pope Francis, is that his desire to reach out to all people, to include everybody, clashes obviously, openly, with teachings that have been part of Catholic thought for millennia, and particularly on these sexual issues. We knew that this was going to happen with regard to blessing same-sex couples. Once you start talking about blessing irregular unions, that the same thing was going to happen. I have to say, this was really quite shocking, this polygamous marriage that was allowed to take place. But it's inevitable because the confusion that exists here is this, that in these documents, we get, I don't want to be too dismissive about this, but really a kind of perfunctory statement that only within marriage or sexual relations allowed, going on, that all the traditional teachings are stated, but then the way that people are going to behave, the way that people in parishes in various places around the world is open to kind of discussion. We remember that Cardinal Fernandez had to come out after Fiducia Supplicans and saying, well, these things should be spontaneous and brief and they should not resemble a marriage in any way. But that's just talk. The documents themselves clearly open up these possibilities, and there are many people out there who want to take advantage of them.
I want to turn to Vatican news now. Pope Francis has officially decreed a Holy Year to be held in 2025, which will kick off this December and continue until January of 2026. 32 million pilgrims are expected. The Bull of Indiction announcing this Holy Year was read by Pope Francis at St. Peter's on May 9th. He said this about God's judgment. Another reality having to do with eternal life is God's judgment, both at the end of our individual lives and the end of history. Artists have often attempted to portray it. Here we can think of Michelangelo's magnum opus in the Sistine Chapel in accordance with the theological vision of our times and with the aim of inspiring a sense of awe in the viewer. Father Jerry, we spoke about this a bit earlier. Just after the bull was released, what do you make of the way the reference to Michelangelo's Last Judgment is worded? It's sort of framed as the theological vision of their times.
Yeah, that was both shocking and upsetting and disappointing because Michelangelo's depiction of the Last Judgment is directly taken from sacred scripture. That, the sheep and the goats are going to be divided, and the sheep will join God in heaven, the goats will be in hell. To say that painting was according to a theological vision of a particular time, implying that it's not the theological vision of the time that we live in, that's very disappointing. That's a very ambiguous way to describe it.
Bob, before we run out of time, your thoughts on sort of dismissing Michelangelo's vision and theology, while at the same time the Vatican, the contemporary Vatican, can't seem to quit the very confused and I would say ugly art of disgraced Jesuit Marco Rupnik. That art is still on the front of their website. It's on announcements. It's remarkable, the endurance of Marco Rupnik, a guy who is charged and more than charged at this point with abusing multiple nuns, men, women. It's just outrageous.
In the case of Rupnik, we're really in the midst of a very raw feeling about this because these women have come forward and told of absolutely horrible, terrible sacrileges that were practiced, not just sexual engagement, but outright sacrilege. And yet his art continues to be the church in Aparecida in Brazil that was just consecrated has some mosaics by Rupnik. So here we have on the one hand women coming forward and talking about being abused and the church wanting to hear them and to value that, and yet on the other hand we allow this to go on. And by the way, in addition to his artwork, Rupnik is still a priest. And what is that all about?
Before we run out of time, the other big news of the week is the impending release of a new Vatican document from Cardinal Fernandez and the DDF, Doctrinal Office of the Vatican, on discerning Marian apparitions and other supernatural events. We've been hearing about this for several weeks, and the pronouncement is expected on Friday, May 17th. Now, the last time the Vatican's Doctrinal Office spoke on this issue was in 1978 under Paul VI. At that time, the Vatican outlined a process by which the Church investigates alleged apparitions and revelations. Father, what are your thoughts on this document? Are you hearing anything? There don't seem to be many leaks at this point.
No, I haven't heard much, but I'm very curious because one of the problems in the modern age is the wide and rapid diffusion when a so-called seer or someone claims to have an apparition or a vision, that the message gets instantly, because of the internet, it's all over the world, and it can attract a following in many, many places. So according to the current law, it's up to the local bishop to investigate the apparition, and then he can get assistance from the bishops' conference because many local bishops are just overwhelmed, even bishop conferences. So my curiosity is whether the Vatican is going to take direct responsibility for judging these apparitions. And sad to say, this is something we see, sex abuse as an example of it, religious frauds are multiple, and it can be very profitable for them. And this is something that has to be dealt with. I'd be interested in the criteria for veracity that they use. And we have to recognize that, yes, the Virgin Mary has been sent by God. Our Lady of Fatima and Our Lady of Lourdes Those are two of the most important events in the history of the church in the 19th and 20th centuries.
Bob, what might that document say? What do you imagine the concerns are at this point? Might there be an assessment of Medjugorje? I mean, I know the Pope has sort of been cold to that that particular apparition and reticent about a lot of these apparitions as they appear. He's made the comment that, you know, Our Lady is not a postal worker and, you know, dropping messages through time. She's not, the Virgin Mary is not a post mistress who sends messages every day. That was the quote.
Yeah, look, as I understand it, the Church never says that Catholics have to believe in an apparition. The most that the Church can say is that there is nothing against the faith in a particular apparition of the Virgin Mary or another saint or something else. I suppose my worry here, as I think has been verified over the last 11 years, is that Rome is going to change the balance of decision-making, as Father was hinting at, between the local ordinary and Rome. We may see Rome arrogating into itself more powers to say what is and is not acceptable in terms of these apparitions. I don't know that that's going to be that serious a thing. They don't happen all that often. There are obviously stunning apparitions like Lourdes and Fatima. And I mean, Fatima is one of these things that was confirmed by tens of thousands of people who saw the sun dance, et cetera. I don't even know how you could deny the miracle at Fatima. But certainly because of what we've seen in other documents, we're going to want to pay attention to that. Ironically, in a papacy that wants to decentralize and go out to the peripheries, an awful lot of powers are being brought into Rome, and I think we may see that.
Gentlemen, we will leave it there. Until next time, we'll be looking forward to your commentary by both Robert Royal and Father Gerald Murray over at thecatholicthing.org. Thank you both.